Picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Well, hey kids, I was putting the video together, getting ready to edit it and get it uploaded, and then I realized that I was missing one. I was missing the very first video. Must not either it didn't record or I didn't have the stupid button pushed. Any reason, really, there wasn't one. So I was making this big introduction about, hey, it's infrastructure week, and instead of building a model, we're going to build shelves, and won't that be fun, kids? And yay, and all that extra energy and all that happiness. And then the file disappeared. And instead, the first thing that comes up was a, rather in the middle of type of explanation of the dining room situation. So please accept this awkwardness in place of that awkwardness, and we will pick up right after this intro with me showing you the patient of that I was getting ready to add the shelves to. Okay, here is the dining room, or slash the secondary display room. And you'll see that, if you may notice, I've even got some of the newer stuff. The smaller kits, like the Moon Man, or the Moon Suit, and the Granny truck, have already found spots, along with the green slime and the Sky Captain robot. But you see that big spot, that there's a big gap there above Nomad, between the top of Nomad and the ceiling and the horribly outdated and peeling wallpaper border, which I've got to do something about at some point. There's an opportunity there for a space, and to make a shelf that goes between these two cabinets. I had thought about moving Nomad into the bigger display room. I can't say that that's completely off the that's not completely off the menu, but I like Nomad there. He's been there forever, and the Kirk and Spock that go with them have been there forever. But you'll notice how I kind of have a lot of my Star Wars kits here, and that's a luxury because you don't always get to group your models. Sometimes it's a question of what space do you have. And then, can you afford to put all of your Star Wars kits together or Star Trek kits together? But here's when you see the problem, because all of this stuff that's on the table, these are big, huge, heavy models, and I need to put them off of this table and find room for them. Now, my goal, I've already got some of the supplies, is to make a standing shelf that will kind of make a U shape over top of Nomad. It will have two sides and a top with reinforcement on the bottom, and to keep the walls together. Now the thing is, I can't simply run a shelf from that cabinet to that cabinet because they've got glass shelves in them. I like glass shelves. I think it's a cleaner look. It's certainly an easier look, particularly if you are having shelves that are up high and you want to be able to see them. The shelves themselves are very thin, they're very strong, and they allow you to look up through the cabinet, and they almost disappear. Unfortunately, what I've got is this sandcrawler. This sandcrawler, if I can get this sandcrawler and the Stan Arts Laboratory up off of this table and onto a shelf up there, that will be a success. Now, those are very, very heavy kits. Well, the lab isn't that heavy, but it's bulky. The sandcrawler is heavy. It is almost, it's not quite as heavy as, believe it or not, I think Audrey 2 is the heaviest thing on this table, and that's because it is solid. That it's a solid resin kit, and the potted plant is full of also full of clay and solid and heavy as lead. But I can't just put those kits just anywhere because of the weight. And I dare not even put them on a glass shelf because I'm afraid they're so heavy that they might cause the glass to break. So a wooden shelf with wooden reinforcement that is 3/4 of an inch thick, that is glued together with not even a single board. It is laminated wood, which will have an increased strength. That's what I've got to do. The weather has turned nice enough that I can get the tools out. So my goal is to, like I say, build, well, here, I'll show you by, let me see, going quick over to the plan here. Here's a quick sketch I did of the shelf. It needs to be 12 inches deep by about 37 inches tall and 41 inches wide. And it's going to have a reinforcement here across the front and a reinforcement at the back to kind of hold the legs together. But it's going to fit in between the two black shelves. Now, if it becomes possible, I will attach them to the wooden part of these shelves, but I can't go but so far because of, like I said, the glass shelves. So the goal is going to be to enclose this area. So nothing to do it at this point but to drag out the tools. Hello, boys. Drag out the tools and start working. This is the crawler. You've seen that, but yeah, all of this stuff, you can see how packed everything is, and you can't even see anything. And that's after the rearrangement. So it's Infrastructure Week. Everybody welcome. Okay, just a little introduction to the wood here. Don't know if you care about such things, but this is what I like to use for my shelf work. It is the project panels. Now the reason is they're dimensionally stable. They're, like I say, they're not a single piece of wood. They are laminated together, glued together, which makes them a little stronger than they would be if they were a single piece of pine. They're calling these stain grade, but I always end up painting mine, usually paint them black. But I've had good luck with them because you can depend on them. Like I said, they're dimensionally stable. If they say they're a foot wide, then they're a foot wide. It's not one of like these deals like 2x4s that aren't quite 2x4. So, and they usually are nice and flat. They don't have twists in them like single boards would. I got them a little long. These ones are 4 feet long. I could have gotten 3 foot long ones, but what I need is a little bit longer. Plus, if I'm doing the cutting on them, then I know I'm cutting them to the exact size that I want. And then these are the smaller pieces of poplar that I am using for just the bracing parts. Here is my leftover wood. I have everything built. It is in the kitchen drying. The glue is curing. Everything here is what's left. It turned out that those sides did need to be a hair under 36 inches tall, so I could have used the stock 36-inch panels. However, no, there's no wastage here because these can end up becoming bases for future model builds. And this piece is what was cut off of the top. I did need the full 41 inches for the width of the top. But yeah, these will be used. Don't worry about that. I can already picture a couple of models that could stand to use bases like this. Okay, so it's built. That didn't take too long. I've even let the glue set on it. But before I paint it, I need to give it a sanding. Now this wood comes in pretty darn good shape, but it still wouldn't hurt to have some of the sharp edges knocked down and sand off some of the glue spills. So we'll sand it up with the little palm sander you see. Of course, I'll take it out on the deck to do that. And then wipe it down with a tack cloth and get some paint to paint it. Now, I normally paint it black. I see a shelf and I want to paint it black. I got my paint out of the tool cabinet and I don't think I've got enough. So it looks like another trip to the big box store. And I think I could probably stand to get a wider roller. I have one of the little small dinky rollers, but I think it'll go quicker if I use a larger roller. So get one of those while I'm out. Okay, I know Easter's not for a few weeks, but I've had my own loaves and fishes miracle here. I poured out what little paint I had left in this can, thinking I had, you know, enough to do a base coat, and then I can go get some more while it was drying. But not only has the base coat covered, and the base coat's what's going to suck in all the paint because it's going over the raw wood, I'll have enough left to do the top coat tonight before I'll let this dry for a few hours and then come back and do the top coat before, I'll do it this evening. And then tomorrow we'll be able to start hauling everything out and putting this in place. But yay, nothing like saving me a trip to the big box store, because I can never get just the one thing that I'm looking for. I always end up coming out having spent way more than I planned. But this is just it's Krylon Color Max acrylic latex satin black indoor outdoor, what they call well, it's the Color Max, but I mean the big box store calls it DIY crafting paint because it's a color you don't have to mix black paint. So yay, we'll let this dry. I've got it down on some cardboard here on the kitchen floor. You know, they've heard the saying that all the world is a stage. Well, all of my house is a workshop, so that's just how it works. And this will dry. I would set it out on the deck, but it's overcast and cloudy, and you know, it might rain on it, so I'm not going to do that. I'll let it dry. It's acrylic paint. There's no fumes, no odor. It's not an oil or anything noxious like that. So we'll let it dry and come back and put a top coat on it. It's 3:30 now. Maybe around 6 or 7 I'll put another coat on the top of it, and that will do it. Good morning and welcome back, everybody. It's day 2 on Infrastructure Week 2024, the first of many, I'm sure. And the shelf has dried overnight, and I've placed it up where it's going to go. Looking at it now, you know the old adage of measure twice, cut once. I probably could have stood to make that about 2 inches shorter. I really wanted to make sure that this had plenty of airspace above it, and I might even have room here to put some under counter lighting up in here. I could put some under a small strip of LEDs up there to downlight that, and that might be nice and showy. But I'm wondering if I sacrificed visibility on the sandcrawler up and the lab being up here by making that shelf a little tall. I guess what I'm trying to do is maximize flexibility, because there is a very good opportunity if I ever move Nomad out of there, I could put another shelf right here, and that way I could still keep Kirk and Spock where they are, but that would give me another good sized shelf. So maybe in the long run that's gonna work. I'm wondering if there is some sort of shelf I could build there, but that would require some angle on it. It could be done. It could be done because I've got those 2 12-inch pieces left. I could, that does give me an idea actually, but for right now I want to go ahead and put the Sandcrawler and the Stan Arts Lab up on their shelf and see if I have room for anything else to go up there with them. This is my step ladder. I never knew my real ladder. That's an old joke. I never knew my real ladder. It's my step ladder. Okay, I've got everything up here. And this is the original goal. This was how I had planned it. I was planning on the height and the weight, but I was never really planning on the width, and I don't like the fact that the Sandcrawler doesn't have a lot of breathing room. I do like the fact that I can finally see Marty's eyes. I can finally see Igor's eyes because of the height. You can see up under it now. I really like that part. I can't stress enough how much I like being able to finally see that. But I don't like the fact that the Sandcrawler doesn't have a lot of breathing space around it. So, I'm thinking, still pondering. I'm starting to warm to the idea of putting a shelf in here on both sides. What would I put on those shelves? I would put Han and Luke on their shelves. I would make a set of matching Tauntaun shelves there. And that would free up that space. If I took Marty off, if I took the lab off of that shelf, I would put the dewback up there, and then I could have more breathing space for the sandcrawler. That's another idea. This is all the kind of stuff, when once you start model Tetris, this is what happens. You start thinking of all kinds of different plans and schemes. The dewback would look good up there. And when I stand back, everything would be fine, because then you'd have the dewback, you'd have the sandcrawler, you'd have a Tatooine shelf, and then you'd have the two Tauntauns on either side, which makes those shelves look more intentional. That would empty off most of that shelf, and possibly I could put the lab there. Possibly. I'd have to get rid of that glass shelf because the lab would come up to about here. So that would mean losing a significant amount of space. I could keep the Stormtrooper and BB-8 probably on this shelf with the lab, and that's all the tall things. But that Star Destroyer would have to move probably up to the top shelf there. So yeah, but it's one of those things, once you start down this road, consume you it will. Okay, it's taken most of the day, but this is where we're at. Now that's a LED light that is way overexposing. You know how the camera doesn't like LEDs. But it, trust me, these aren't going anywhere even as heavy as they are. They've got shelf brackets going underneath them. These shelf brackets are bolted into both sides with big washers on the back. If they're never going to be torn out. They're metal bolts. Now I do have screws going from the shelf bracket up into the shelf just to hold the wood in place. Trust me, it's the weight of the Tauntauns that's holding the shelves down. But on either side, they are bolted through, and you can see the bolts there coming out the other side. So they're not gonna tear out the wood under the weight. So those are in for good. I do, you know, I sincerely wish, and I know this is not the Stan Arts people's fault, but I wish they had been made bookended or mirrored like bookends. I wish Luke had been turned the other way, or Han had been turned the other way. Unfortunately, no, they did exactly the way they're on camera, and you can't fault them for that. But man, if that could have been turned if I could have been able to do this with the Tauntaun head facing out and Luke facing out, that would have been so much neater. But we don't have that. We only have what we have, so we cannot waste time wishing for what we don't have. I am going to push him a little bit further back to get him away from that light. And I have room for something tiny here if I wanted to put something tiny. I don't know what that would be, but I do have room for it. So the remaining question is, we put the sandcrawler back up there. We move the dewback up to there. What do we do with the Stan Arts lab? The Stan Arts lab that was fitting up there, but just barely. Do we try to make space for it somewhere else? Stay tuned, because I think I'm going to put the sandcrawler up there next, and then the dewback. Okay, without the light on, it's a lot easier to see the stuff that's going on that shelf. But there you go. That's the top shelf with the crawler and the dewback, and I even put that little chicken walker up there. But this is it for the end of the day on Tuesday. Now, I would have hoped to have gotten a lot more done. However, the shelf idea for the two Tauntauns, it turned out better than I was hoping it was going to turn out, and it took up a good chunk of time to do. So I don't regret that, because in the long run I think it's a good thing. I was able to pull off a couple more kits off of the table and onto that shelf to replace where the three of those figures were. So now I'm going to try to put everything back in place, and I am back to ground zero trying to figure out where that Stan Arp's Frankenstein's lab is going to go. But yeah, you got to, sometimes you just got to turn around and pivot. Morning, everybody. I am changing. I started off with Infrastructure Week, did 2 days of rearranging and putting up some new structure, and I'm done. I finished what I needed to get done yesterday. It's still, it's still a mess. It still needs more work. I'm still sorely out of room, but I have a little bit of breathing space left. But now I am changing tacks, and I am going to be working on this wonderful 3D creation from Jeff Fink of the concept shuttle. This was something that Matt Jeffries drew up. It's based on that. It's Jeff's own take on it, but it's the Jeffries concept shuttle from Classic Trek. Now, the reason they didn't make this and they went with the Galileo is, it's staring you in the face. Look at all those curves and rounds, and no, they ended up doing the bread box because it was a lot cheaper to make. So I have changed my theme of the week. It was no longer Infrastructure Week. It is now Shelves and Shuttles. That's the new title for this week, Shelves and Shuttles. And as I said, this was something Jeff and I have been kind of going back and forth on in the last month or so. He's refined it. He's gotten it dialed in. He's changed some details on it, and I'm going to be tackling the final version later on in the summer because it's going to take a while to print. This is I printed this at 50% of the size he designed it, so imagine it twice as big. That's the size he designed it. Well, even the final design is huge. So I think I'll take his final design and I will print that at like 80% when I eventually get to printing it. But this one I want to just not rush through. That's a bad word. I'm going to build this up with no lights, and I will print out some decals for it, but nothing fancy. I just want to get it built and show it as a proof of concept. I could be tempted. I might even paint it gold and just do it as a shelf, shelf study. That's a thought. But basically, I want to prove that it does work, and to make good on the promise to Jeff that I said I would put this together and build it. And as small as it is, I know where it's going to fit on a shelf already. So I'm going to go ahead and build this up, and then when time comes that I can print out the larger version, that's the one I'm going to put the lights in and put more time into and all of that. So this is, as I said, it is the concept shuttle. It was printed a while ago. I do need to clean up some of the parts because, holes that look like they're big enough aren't quite big enough when time comes to add. If that chair looks familiar, that was my original Galileo shuttle chair when I was that I put up on Cult's 3D place, not Steve's site, but Cult's 3D. If it's a place for 3D printed parts that we came up with for the original shuttle, Galileo shuttle, back before there was an interior provided. But it's a neat build. I like the design of it. I'm gonna have some fun with it. So let's get cracking on it. Okay, so I've got enough parts done in sub-assemblies that I can take them outside and put some primer on them. This is not glued in, sorry. The under bottom hull is ready to be primed. This will be a darker gray color like the Galileo. It's going to have a lot of the same colors as the Galileo. No reason to change those, but this will be a darker gray. This will be a white with accents on it, or a very light gray with accents on it. But you can see I've got the console glued in. Now, and this is the floor, and of course the inside is going to be that institutional green. And I've got the nacelles ready to go. Now, the one thing I'm going to break with, and Jeffrey, I hope you don't mind, is I'm not putting this inner framework in. And the only reason I'm doing that because at this scale and the fact that I'm not lighting it means you're only going to see what you can see through the front windows. And you're just not going to see that in there, I don't feel. It's a great feature, and it's something I definitely want to use on the larger version. I just don't think for this it's necessary. I'm actually, if I paint that light enough, you may see all the way back in there, but I'm not counting on you seeing too much of it. It's just basically going to cut off there anyway. If you see the front chairs and the consoles, that may be enough. Again, if this were lit, and the big one will be, then we will have more cause to put that in. So, and I may be debating on how many chairs I'm going to put in. I think I'll put them all in. Now you'll notice that the doors here are on both sides, like that concept shuttle does have it. But you'll notice that the bottom of the tub here does not have a cutout. That is something that has been changed on the second version of this, so that you can have the bottom of the door flap open like the old, like the Galileo did. So that is something that is changing from version to version. And let's see what else. Also, the location of marker lights and things like that. I think we had counted on one strobe up here and then a strobe down here. But we'll see what that looks like when we get the bigger parts out. Yeah, so I think I'm ready. Let's wipe this down, get some of the dust off of it, and get the primer on it. Right, the primer coats have more or less dried, and I'm massing in some basic colors. Of course, the bottom of the shuttle will be gray, and the wings of the pylons will be gray as well. The inside is that coral color, the deep peach color that you see on the lower half of the inside of the Galileo, and it's also up around the soffit of the lighting at the top of the roof. We're not going to have room for that up on the roof, but I wanted to put some of that here. Here's the top, and it's got that not quite cockpit green, but the sky green inside there. And I've just been playing around with a light royal gray for some of these details that are new. This will be a whiter white when we're done, but I need to mask that off first. Here, of course, we have the seats or the floor in the back wall. Seats will all be black. Those have been painted, and I'm toying with the idea of making the nacelles the same color as this, the light royal, the royal light gray. I didn't want them to be dark gray, but I don't know if I want them to be white either. So I think this is a nice compromise. And of course, they'll have silver details on them like the other shuttle nacelles did. But we're at a spot where we can let all this dry. Now, I did go ahead and paint the console of the cockpit green, and it looks like I might need to go over that again and knock down some of those brush strokes. Putting the windows in, putting the glass in is also something I'm not going to do on this smaller version. I'll hang on to that idea and use it for the big one when I do it. But we're getting the major color, the color masses done. And once this is dried, I can mask that off and go with I don't know if it's going to be 100% white. It might end up being just a very, very, very light gray instead. But yeah, it's kind of, and of course the color that's going to come into it is going to be in the lettering and in the decals. Morning, everybody. It's Thursday. It's the gateway to the weekend. How you doing? Work is continuing on the concept shuttle, as I'm calling it. And we might actually get some decals down today. And the reason I say that is there's not a lot to do on this. And it's by design. Like I said, this is going to be the easy run, the first trial run. I'm not going to put any lights in it, not putting any glass in the windows, not doing any of the really time-consuming and difficult stuff, just because that's not the mission statement for this kit. Not even going to put in the framework of the cabin, which would go there. But, you know, if I had a light in there, once that light happens, then it becomes something that is worthy of being noticed. But once I put the top on this, you're not going to see in it. So today, you'll notice the top is missing because I've actually put a first couple of satin coats over the white portions of it so that I can put the decals down. And then, of course, it'll get a flat coat after it's done, but that's why it's not here. And I'm also doing the same on the nacelles. What I want to do now before I put the chairs in, though, is to glue this floor down. It's got a bit of a curve or warp to it, but that's because of the size, I think. I asked Jeff to make these parts thinner than he normally does, and that's the result. So once you build something larger than this, obviously the floor would be thicker. But look at all the pattern of the supports there. Support patterning is ugly. I don't like it, but it's not a lot of ways around it at this point, except getting better at printing. So let's get some. I'm thinking that it could be a question of getting some 5-minute epoxy whipped up. CA, I think, would set up too quickly. Although, it might be worth trying. Let's just put CA to it. I can hold it down in place, but we're going to need to put CA around the bottom of this and then around this edge. So I've been going through a lot of CA lately. Let's go ahead and do this. And then just around. The careful thing is I don't want it to sploosh out around the top. And then, of course, once we've done all of this, we can put the chairs in. Carefully. Okay. Holding it down. And holding the back wall down. Letting that set up. Okay, that part is that. Let me see. Clampies. Let's see if we can do any of this with clampies. No, I can't really get a good clamp in there, so we're just going to hold it down. Probably could run a B to CA around the inside there to really hold that from the back side. And again, that's part of why I'm building this smaller version, is to see what would help, what problems I'm going to face, and what would be handy to help when I do the larger version. I could run a little bit of kicker down through here. There. Okay, that's in. Let's close that up. And now I think we're ready to pop some chairs in. Well, let me see. I'm seeing some more. Okay. Yeah, squeeze that in. A little bit more on that side. Okay, so the next thing to do would be to grab some of these chairs and put them in place. Alrighty, I've got the seats down and the floor down, and it's, should look very familiar to y'all. Jeff did include this interesting side bench area. These would be benches that would be similar to what you saw in the Kelvin Universe shuttle, and I believe in the Strange New World shuttle they also use this more, I won't say militaristic, but more utilitarian version where you've got railings and handholds and things like that. Now this is the interior that's designed to go on it. That again, I said I wouldn't be using for this particular build. And you can see the rib work that is inside here that's also meant to emulate that theme. And the benches would have gone right in that center bit. But I like the idea of the benches. I just said, like I said, wasn't going to put the cage work on at this scale. But it's looking really good. I'm going to go see if the top part is dry or has cured enough that I can epoxy it down, because I'm going to kind of have to clamp it down to make sure that it makes a good seal all the way around there, just like an old denture grip ad. And then we have these nacelles to put on, and I kind of wanted to wait until I had everything done before I put the nacelles on, because I want to have the entire body in front of me so that I can level the nacelles to make sure that they're on straight. Yeah, you can use these guides, use these as a guide, but I'd rather have the whole thing in front of me so that I can kind of eyeball the level on the nacelles. So I think what I might like to do before I get too much further would be to go ahead and put a satin coat just to protect the paint. I probably would end up repainting it or recoating it with a flat. But I might even put the flat on first. Just put a flat coat on there to protect this paint. I'd like the idea of the two different looks, the flat on the bottom and then the gloss on the top. So let's do that. Let's take this out and put a flat coat just on the bottom there so that I can be handling it without worrying about knocking the paint around. It's time to glue the top and the bottom down. I've got some epoxy out, 5-minute epoxy. I've got some clamps out because I'm going to be able to clamp it down. Basically, I want to put the thinnest and tiniest of beads of epoxy along this inside edge here, just along the inside edge. And I don't want to risk it squeezing out around the outside of it, but it may happen. So if that does occur, there will be, cursing off camera. Let's get out. Every time I do this, I forget to clean off my sculpting tools, so there's always leftover epoxy on them. Epoxy on both your houses, I always say. But yeah, we're going to do a little bit of mixing with the sculpting tool, and then just the tiniest bit on here. Actually, I might even want to get a toothpick out to do that spreading. And as always, I need to check to see whether I've got one out before I get another one. Because then you end up like, you have a dozen half-used toothpicks. So let's get out some some epoxy. Shut up, you. I've had enough of you. There. Okay, I'll be back when all this is done. All right, I've got the top clamped down. We're going to let that set. There's not a lot of, it may look like there's a lot of room or a lot of space for the epoxy to go, but there really isn't. The top and the bottom are pretty evenly sized. If I had any thing to say to Jeff in that instance, it might be to make the inner ledge a little bit fatter so that the top has more room or more meat to sit down on. But other than that, we're pretty good shape. I've got a little bit of spillage here that I can wipe up, and I think also if I let it dry, if I let it cure, I keep saying dry, if I let it cure, I feel I can clean it off a lot easier then, and if not, I can handle it with a flat coat over top of it. I don't think it will hurt too much of that. So we're going to let that sit, and we're going to come back a little bit later and pop the nacelles on to make sure that they are nice and square and flush. I need to paint the front dome, but I've got the silver on the back, and I'm including the ball in the silver as well. But these will go on just like, well, just like nacelles do, you know. They kind of go like that and like this, but I want to make sure that they're on nice and straight. Okay, it's into the evening on Thursday, and there's some stuff I'd like to get done so that it is drying all night, and chief of this is the decals for at least the belly, so that I can flip it over and do the decals on the top tomorrow without worrying about what's happening to them. And Jeff has just given me the sheet of said locations for decals, and I'm ready to start putting some of them down at least. Okay, so the majority of the decals are down. I'll tell you, mistakes were made. Mistakes were made in that I did not do the console decals while I still had the top off. So since you can't really see in there that well anyway, I'm just going to paint some black shapes in there. I do have the biggest ones to go yet, and I will tell you that Jeff, I don't think they are big enough. Now, I did take his original file and I shrank it down to the same 50% as the rest, as I did these STL files. But when I come to look at his description of that, make sure it's in the camera, the description of that, which should go from here all the way over to here, that's not what happens when I put the decal down. So what I need to do is check, because I brought in his original decal art file, and then I shrank it down to 80% to get it for the big one that I'm going to print. And then I copied that, and then I shrank it down. And I don't know whether I shrank down from and I typed in 50. And I don't know whether I shrank it 50% of that 80 or 50% of the 100, because the rest of them seem to be filling out the spaces just fine. It's just that when I put that there, it needs to be a lot longer than what it is when I physically put it down to match the illustration. The chevron there should be on the complete other side of the door, and here it's barely coming up to the this side of the door. So I think what I'm going to do is, much as it pains me, because these sheets of decal film are not cheap, is I'm going to have to print another set of decals, bumping up the size of that. Now the good thing is I will also bump up the size of the 80% one, because if it's a case of not being proportionately big enough, then it's also not proportionally big enough on the large scale either. So yeah, these are the things you learn by doing. I had only intended to do the bottom of the ship decals, but it's like potato chips where you can't eat just one. So I just gone through, and those were the only ones I wanted to do, were these ones on the bottom. But looks like I went ahead and did the rest of them. Okay, it took some math, which at this time of day and at this day of the week is no good for me. But it took some math to do it. But I figured out that I needed to scale up the main registries so that they would fit in a way that was more, well, it was bigger. It was more in keeping with what these illustrations are. And as an example, I shrunk down the rest of the decals to 50%, but the main registry stripe was at 60%. to be at to fill the appropriate amount of space out. We'll just say it that way. And now it matches what's on his illustrations as far as the stripe going all the way through the door and ending on the other side and finishing up just at the corner of the window there, and yet still being, you know, fairly aligned with this with the inset here. So I also at the same time, there's the other side, I also at the same time took the opportunity on the larger scale ones, the ones that I made 80%, to go ahead and bump that decal up to 90%, just so that it'll be ready when the day comes. And that's where we're going to leave it for today. Good morning, everybody. It's Friday. It's the last work day of the week. The last work day on this particular shuttle. I am printing the beginnings of the next version of this, which will be much larger. There's one last piece I have not put on this, and that is the fold-down rear landing gear, because frankly it's a tiny part, and I didn't want to just print it by itself. It's kind of a waste to warm up the printer just for that little thing. So I decided I would throw it on the pile while I'm starting to print the larger pieces for the larger shuttle, which should be about yay big. Well, it's like the one-armed fisherman who caught a fish that big. It helps if you see both of them. It's about yay big. So it's a lot bigger than this one, and it's proportionately bigger, obviously. So I went ahead, started some of the smaller parts of that. Shut up, yo. And at the same time, I printed the smaller landing gear pad for the back. So what I'm going to do with this now, take it outside, put a coat of spray to seal in these decals, and then when that part comes out, I can add it on at the last. So I think what I'd like to do is, it's beautiful outside today. I'm going to take this outside, start with a satin coat on the top, and then once that satin coat is in, I think I'm going to try to differentiate this again and make the bottom a flat coat, so that I have a flat and a satin. We'll see how that goes. We may not be able to, particularly around here, we may not be able to make that differentiation. Maybe just on the bottom, but you can see how scuffed up it's getting, and you can see the gloss of the epoxy that I put on yesterday. That'll all disappear once there's a unifying clear coat on it. So doing that now. Okay, I love this little kit. I love it. I am still printing the missing landing gear that goes back there, but I've got the nice flat coat on the tub. Got the satin coat on the top. I didn't do the flat coat here. I'm not that brave yet, but I did do the flat coat there, and I'm not seeing a ton of difference, so I might just leave it without trying to put a flat coat, or on this bit of it at least. Yeah, if I had a gripe, because you know I'm going to have a gripe. If I had one gripe, it's that the decals aren't backed in white. And the only reason that's important is because of these guys, and anything really that shows up on the, except for black, anything that shows up on the dark gray, it just disappears. Now, the black is no problem. This is where you kind of see the dulled colors, and then there's these nav thrusters here that you don't quite see very well because of that. But man, and this is me, that little scratch on the red. That was me, because these are homemade decals, and I was a little bit rough with them, putting them down, and I was carefully burnishing it with a toothpick, or not toothpick, but a Q-tip, and I got too aggressive with that. So that's just something you have to learn. Maybe I could have sealed them better, but you know me and that sealer, I don't want to touch it, so I just need to be a little bit lighter on the handling of the homemade decals. But most of the carrier film has disappeared. If you hold it in the light, you can still see it. But that's because the homemade stuff, that carrier film, is not as delicate as the professional stuff. So That's just the grade of decal. But yeah, no windows in here. Put that last bit of... I can't really get in there with a brush to try to paint the instruments. That's something I should have thought of and done before I closed it up. But you don't really see them all that well anyway. So, all intents and purposes, this is done with the exception of the back landing gear. It's Friday into the afternoon, and I'm having a very frustrating day with the printer. I've tried printing several times the back gear, and it's not coming out. And I think it has to do with the update of Chitubox, the latest update. So this is the last time. I mean, I went back and re-sliced it in the older version, and I've bumped up all of my settings, and if this doesn't work this time, we're going to finish the video without it and readdress it at a later date. But I think if it doesn't work this time, that means I got to strip it down, the printer down tomorrow, and re-level the bed and all that kind of stuff, and I just don't have time to do that today. Hey, you know what they say, if first you don't succeed, try again, and that's particularly pertinent when it comes to 3D printing. I've got the last little bit of landing gear done. Now, in this iteration, Jeff didn't have any sort of attachment point for it, so I just figured out where it looked best, where the math worked, and stuck it down. But there really should be an attachment joint there, or some sort of little clip for the gear to fit into. I guess if you want to do it completely retracted, you just fold it up and glue it flat to the hull. But it's enough to sit it straight when it's sitting down. It's no longer sitting like this, it's sitting level. And that's it. That's the end. That is the finale on the concept shuttle. This should be good enough to use as a makeshift shuttle bay turntable, but I just wanted to show it from all sides. And again, don't get too enamored of this small version, because things have changed when it comes to making the big one, so keep that in mind. But as a prototype, it's not half bad. And that's going to do it for this very special Shelves and Shuttles week here at the Aztek Temple. I hope you don't mind the little derivation from the norm. Next week we'll get back to regular full body contact model building. But sometimes you just got to build shelves. So until next time, y'all be safe, be smart, be good to each other, be good to yourself. Be back here next time.